During a recent trip to Japan, I visited the Tokyo National Museum and looked at some of the Japanese art and historical cultural artifacts. That's my idea of fun. I know I'm awesome. Anyway, great trip, I highly recommend it. And during the visit, I came across an interesting story that I thought to share with all of you. In the second half of the 1800s, after the Meiji Restoration, Japan eagerly sought engagement with the West. Art had been one of those areas of engagement. And then they realized the West saw their art, treasured crafts produced over generations, as just furniture. Over the span of 3 world fairs, Japan sought international acceptance of its heritage items as fine arts. It was a test of their influence and their own internal development. That's the subject of today's video. But first, I want to remind you about the newsletter. Check out the newsletter to read the entire scripts for previously released videos, including those you might not have seen before. The sign-up link is in the video description below. I try to put one out every week, maybe 2. Alright, back to the show. Europe's first major exposure to Japanese items came in 1862 in London, only a few years after its opening up. The exhibition showed woodworking, ivory, and lacquerware. It was called the Japanese Court in the International Exhibition. That one, however, was not official. It had been set up by the British Minister to Japan, Rutherford Alcock. The exhibition was a smashing success, starting the trend of Japanism. Japanism is a phrase coined in the late 19th century, describing European and American popularity for Japanese art and design. Western artists were captivated by things like Japan's woodblock prints, ukiyo-e, or pictures of the floating world. This genre of oddly flat art includes the famous Great Wave off Kanagawa print by Hokusai, which has influenced everything from that guy Vincent van Gogh to the ocean wave emoji on Apple systems. In 1871, the Meiji government agreed to participate in its first World Fair in Vienna, the Wiener Weltausstellung, in 1873. It was the first such exhibition held outside of the UK or France. 35 countries participated. Other non-Western participants included China, Egypt, and Persia. Western countries like France and the UK used these exhibitions to develop their cultural industry and spread a message. Japan, too, had a message to tell. The country's primary overarching goal was to avoid China's fate of being carved up by foreign interests. At the time, China was having many of its coastal areas, like Hong Kong, turned into foreign concessions. A decade earlier, in 1850, Japan itself had seen 5 of its ports ceded to foreign governments, thanks to a series of unequal treaties. To prevent this from happening again, the Meiji government was pushing a massive modernization wave to transform its feudal culture, economy, and more. But in order to fund this modernization, the Meiji needed foreign currency. So, with this exhibition, Japan wanted to do 3 things. First, they wanted to examine other countries' goods for techniques that their own domestic industries might be able to adopt. Second, they wanted to tell the world that Japan had a fertile land capable of producing excellent goods. They wanted to kickstart an export market for Japanese arts and crafts products. This policy was known as Shokushan Kogyo, or the promotion of industry. And lastly, they wanted to make sure that their own historical heritage items stayed within the country. The collapse of the Tokugawa had loosened restrictions, and the new government wanted to make sure that the only thing leaving the country were trade items, not treasures. Many of the works collected and protected during this effort would eventually go towards founding a national museum, the Tokyo National Museum that I visited, that inspired this video. The preparatory work took over 2 years and was directed by the Meiji government's Council of State, then its highest political body. The country allocated 500,000 yen out of its meager budget for the work. The Japanese were known for hiring consultants from the West. One significant such individual brought in specifically for the Vienna show was Dr. Gottfried Wagener. Wagener first came to Japan in 1868 to open a soap factory. A few years later, he, as it so often happens, found himself teaching a Western ceramics course in what is now the University of Tokyo. For this exhibition, Wagener, recognizing Japan's weaknesses on mass production, selected goods that he felt exhibited the high technical craftsmanship of the country's artisans, precision handcrafted products. Items shown range from historical treasures to artworks to manufactured goods. They included a lager from an Osaka brewery, some Edo period armor and weapons, and a sword said to belong to Toyotomi Hideyoshi himself. Glorious Nippon steel folded over 1,000 times. The Meiji government built an entire Japanese garden, the first of its kind ever to be put in Europe, and a Shinto shrine. They tried to exhibit the 15-meter-tall Great Buddha statue from the temple of Todaiji in Nara, but sadly it burnt down as it was being unpacked and they could only exhibit the head. The World Fair had great expectations, but on the whole it was seen as a bit of a letdown, mostly due to flooding and a cholera epidemic which so rudely interrupted the festivities. That being said, many of the Japanese items sold quite well. Even the garden was sold to a British trading company. The items sold so well that the government founded a company solely dedicated to exporting Japanese goods to the West, called Kiritsu Kosho Kaisha. There was one issue, though. While preparing the Japanese language translations for their arts, they came across the term fine arts, a term that did not exist in Japanese and a concept they did not understand. At this time, the West had a distinction between fine arts, items made solely for their aesthetic purpose, and decorative arts, items meant to be both beautiful and useful. The Japanese never considered this issue before. They never even had a way to comprehend it. The language had one generic name for art back then, which is, and I'm going to butcher this pronunciation, gige. This word was less about the item's aesthetics and more about the materials, techniques, and accumulated skills that its creator used to create it. This confusion, not so unusual at the time, directly led to the creation of the word bijutsu, which includes the Chinese character for beautiful and clearly indicates the aesthetic concept of fine arts. On the other side, in 1890, the Japanese added a new modern term for decorative arts, koge, which literally means crafts. In the aftermath of this World Fair, as well as another in 1878 in Paris, Japanese leaders started to realize that their goods were being classified as decorative arts. This meant that such Japanese treasures, their ceramics, lacquerware, and folding screens, were seen as an inferior art, pretty trinkets meant for use. This was particularly the case with Japan's lacquerware. For the 1878 exhibition, the Japanese government had brought some of its finest lacquerware goods, including the writing box with 8 bridges, made in 1700 and deemed a national treasure. The items attracted praise from some of Europe's finest furniture makers like Albert Jacquemart, who called it bright, brilliant, and intense. But there were haters too. Influential art critic Ernest Chesnow, on the other hand, called the Japanese exhibit to be nothing more than a pastiche of manual objects dressed up with decorated motifs. And Ernie wasn't the only guy thinking this. This line of criticism had been brewing since the very first exhibition all the way back in 1862. And then in 1883, Louis Gonsett published the widely read book L'Art Japan, framing much of Japan's art in this sort of vein. To be fair, a number of critics clapped back. The French critic Philippe Berti, who invented the phrase Japanism, called the 1878 exhibition a great victory for objects that combine art and functionality. This criticism has to be taken into context of the Western art world's greater debate over the merit of decorative arts versus fine arts. Nevertheless, the Japanese were dismayed to find that their fine arts output was seen as nothing more than just furniture. The 1880s saw the Japanism export trend reach its full height, and despite attempts at some quality control in 1882, the flood of low-quality goods was starting to saturate the market. The Meiji government wanted to show the world that Japan was a modern nation with a sophisticated artistic culture, not a land of trinkets. Thus, they sought to rapidly bring their fine arts industry in line with Western tastes. Artistic traditions in Japan were changed to meet Western standards. They opened schools of fine art, sent Japanese artists to Europe for learning, and encouraged participation in shows. This allowed for the emergence of notable artists like Kuroda Seiki, known as the father of modern Western-style painting in Japan, and Takamura Kon, who applied Western techniques to Japanese wooden statue making. Yet this rapid modernization had profound effects on the psyche. Throughout his career, Wagner repeatedly urged Japanese industrial officials to resist copying Western products outright. Rather, quote, efforts should be made to give play to unique national ways and means, end quote, essentially meaning that they shouldn't lose what makes them special. When it came time for the 1893 World Exposition in Chicago, Japan determined to take a different path. After a series of market tests from 1885 to 1890 found the Japanism export industry on a downward turn, the government decided to shift its policy focus away from decorative arts exports towards industrialized manufacturing. Previously, institutions like the Tokyo National Museum played their part by exhibiting these decorative objects. No more. The museum's goals were reassigned to displaying and boosting traditional Japanese fine arts. For the 1893 exposition, the Japanese committee vowed to, quote-unquote, elevate their decorative arts to the same level as their, quote, fine arts, end quote. As the official policy states, official recognition as works of art should be sought for art without distinction between painting and decorative arts. It was a high-stakes flex of Japan's global influence. In 1894, the unequal treaties were due to be revised by the U.S. Congress, the Treaty of November 22, 1894, and Japan was anxious to be seen as an equal member of the International Committee. Unfortunately, on the whole, the Western art community largely continued its hard delineation between fine and decorative arts. While a few Japanese items were exhibited as fine arts, those items were made by Japanese artists trained in the Western style. The country's most high-profile traditional art categories, lacquerware and ceramics, did not appear in the Fine Arts Palace. They were instead shown in the manufacturers section. Regardless, the Japanese government learned a lot from the experience, including how to build their global influence on the world stage. It was an important step towards Japan's rise down in the future. Alright everyone, that's it for tonight. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel, sign up for the newsletter, and I'll see you guys next time.